I'm Penny. I'm a board member of NAO, an agricultural specialist and a natural resource specialist, and currently also entering the green hydrogen sector, of course. I'm just going to do a brief introduction before our speakers start. In organic agriculture, there is a focus on soil health and the life that it holds within the soil. Healthy soils produce healthy plants, which are more able to withstand pests and diseases. Healthy soils and animals require fewer or no chemicals at all, because the healthier the soil, the less or the fewer chemicals we require. Our two speakers, Manjo and Jako, both with a background in the conventional and organic farming system, will present an improving farm productivity by incorporating organic principles into your farming system with a focus on soil health. Again, the key word here is soil health. This is a series of a guest lecture forms part of work under the Knowledge Hub on Organic Agriculture in Southern Africa, also known as KHSA, which focuses on promoting organic agriculture through capacity building, creating networks, and information sharing. Organic agriculture is based on the principles of health, ecology, fairness, and care. It is under these principles that soil health plays a key role. Okay. So our first speaker will be Jako, and then the second speaker will be Manjo, but I will introduce both speakers at the same time, and then they can then just present after each other. And then after that, we will have a Q&A session. So Mr. Jako Pieterse, Jako is a founder and the managing director of EcoSoil in South Africa. After managing a conventional fruit farm in the Western Cape for 10 years, using the best technologies and techniques, Jako was looking for answers on how to deal with the ever-growing problems of pests and diseases. Following a presentation on soil health by an organic farmer, Jako quickly realized that microbial life in the soil were the answer, which led to his development of a compost tea for generating degraded agricultural soil. Since its humble beginnings in 2005, EcoSoil has grown to a company that assists farmers generate their land and become less dependent on synthetic inputs across South Africa. So Jako will be speaking from a 10-year experience, ladies and gentlemen. And then we move on to Manjo. As a founding member of the Namibian Organic Association, which is the one I'm part of now, Manjo has been actively involved in growing the organic sector in Namibia. At the same time, she served as an IFOM Organics International World Board member for 6 years. She farmed organically in Namibia for several years before moving to Botswana in 2020. Here, she and her husband produce carrots and beetroots in the conventional system while integrating cover crops and livestock to realize the benefits of organic agricultural principles. Their aim is to develop a more resilient farming system, improving productivity and reduce external inputs. Again, that's over 6 years experience speaking, ladies and gentlemen, and we are excited to hear from our two speakers. So Jako, will start with you first. The floor is yours. You can please feel free to also do a further introduction of what I haven't mentioned, and then followed by Manjo, and then from there we will then have our Q&A sessions. Thank you so much, Jako. Please take over.
Hello, I'm Jako Pieterse. My business EcoSoil was founded in 2005, and it was a result of my experience as a farmer. I was a farm manager on a fruit farm in Manus in the Mulaare Valley, and I started the farm from scratch. So I was fortunate enough to make my own mistakes on the farm and discover through learning through my mistakes truly how to farm in a better way. to farm more in harmony with nature and to farm in such a way that you benefit the system and that you actually increase the productivity of that system. So I founded EcoSoil in 2005 with the idea of learning as much from nature as possible in order to design better products, that will aid in agriculture and so on. So my speech today is about how to create self-regulating regenerative systems. So I firstly want to talk a little bit about systems, maybe give you an alternative take on it, and maybe it's given the times that we live in and the fast pace of change, maybe we should look at systems in another way and design it in a better way so that we can cope with the fast changing pace of how our circumstances are changing around us at the present moment. So my first thing that I want to talk about is about plant consciousness. There's a new science called plant neurobiology, and this Italian guy, Stefano Mancuso, is one of the people that's on the forefront of this new science. And what I just want to show you here is that plants are able to make decisions and are able to sense. So here you see two bean plants that are competing for one stake. So they first sense the stake and then they compete to reach that stake. And when the first plant reaches that stake, the second plant then realizes that it lost the competition and it then starts looking for another stake. So this is a very simple experiment that can be repeated 100 times and you will get the same result. And there's no communication here in this instance between the plant roots because the plants are planted in pots. So this whole sensing business is done through the leaves or the aura of the plant or whatever. But it is definitely clear indication that plants are able to make decisions and are conscious beings. So we must treat the system as alive and as such interact with that system in that manner. We must also realize that there's no closed systems in nature. Everything is open and is influenced by everything else. So we have an impact on the environment and the environment has an impact on us. And we must realize that systems are stacked within each other. So each system is made up of much smaller systems inside itself, and every system is part of a bigger system. So we as human beings, for instance, have systems within us, like organs. Inside the organs, we have cells. Inside the cells, we have organelles. Inside the organelles, there's molecules. Inside the molecules, there's elements. And inside the elements, there's atoms and so on. You can carry on deeper and deeper. And eventually you find that in the atom, the electron is far away from the nucleus of the atom. And the whole thing is made up of 99% empty space. And there's very little matter inside this little thing. So it's actually, creation is actually a very, if you look deep down into it, it's actually a very humble experience to realize that everything is really connected and that there's one source creator of everything. If you look outside ourselves, we are part of a bigger system called the Earth. We are not on top of the Earth, we're inside the Earth. The skies above us are part of the Earth, and so we are inside the Earth. And since we are inside the Earth, we also influence the health of the Earth. Our actions clearly have an impact on the Earth, and if we don't realize that we are integrated with the rest of creation and not separate from it, then obviously our impact will always be detrimental to the rest of the system. So if we do more harm than good, then the system deteriorates and we will also suffer the consequences of that, and we see it a lot in agriculture where we disturb the system continuously and the system continuously returns less the next cycle. And so we have to continuously put more inputs into to achieve the same productions. And it's this never-ending downward spiral that we see happening. So there's two vital concepts that we need to understand. The one is entropy, and this is the measure of the system's decay into chaos. We see it everywhere around us. We just experienced two very heavy incidents of storms in the Western Cape. The second one was hectic here in our valley. 9 dams burst, a lot of damage in power and roads and all that. And in Franschhoek, I don't know if you saw that, but there was homes buried in mud. So yeah, it's quite hectic. So if you look in nature, and when nature does its thing naturally, you see the reverse of entropy. Things become more in order the longer you carry on, or the longer the system improves. So we see an increase in organization, structure, and function. And if we realize how this is possible, we can then design our own systems to increase in function, and that's what we're trying to achieve with our approach. So a healthy ecosystems basically look like this. You see a huge plant diversity. There's different trees, shrubs, and because you have all this plant diversity, you will have a very diverse microbial species in the soil, lots of insects and reptiles and animals and birds. And the more food sources there are, the more animals and more species will be attracted to that system. You will also notice that the soil is completely covered. There's also a huge humus content in that soil. The soil is well aerated as well, and this is a healthy ecosystem. The soil is healthy and the plants are healthy. You can see it by the shine in the banana plant's leaf. That is very healthy and happy in that environment. So normally in agriculture, we will view the other plants as weeds, but clearly in this natural system, the so-called weeds are feeding and keeping this plant healthy. So underneath in the soil, we basically find that there is lots of beneficial organisms in the soil and very few detrimental organisms. So the balance is achieved by this vast diversity of beneficials that keeps the pathogens population at bay. So when conditions arise where it favors the growth of the pathogens, then there is enough beneficial species that can multiply again to outcompete the pathogens and bring their population down again. So this system knows how to self-correct and to keep the system flourishing and improving with time. This is an agricultural system that looks very unhealthy. There's a monocrop, very low plant diversity, only bananas. The soil is bare, and where the soil is bare, the soil is crusted over, so the soil is not able to breathe. Underneath the banana leaves, if you open the soil there will be pores, so the soil will be able to breathe there, but the rest of the soil is basically covered and crusted over. Also, the soil temperatures in the system is quite high, so you automatically lose that top 5 centimeters of soil, which is too hard for the roots to actually grow into. Your micropopulation is also low because of that, and the diseases can flourish. You also see that there's mostly micropores in your soil, very little aeration, so the soil is very anaerobic as well, or the organism species is mostly anaerobic. So that you get this pathogens that are flourishing because there's too few beneficial organisms in that system. So you get this downward spiral of soil degradation and running cost that keeps increasing because of the system that deteriorates. And we want to change that around to a system that constantly improves. So we have to get rid of the causes of entropy. And fertilizers are the major cause of entropy in the agricultural system. We must realize that 80% of the fertilizers that we put down is actually lost. Most of are leached into the groundwater. Some evaporate, some are bind to the soil particles and are not accessible to plants. And the 20% that does enter the plant, 10% of that is utilized by the plant and can be converted to amino acids and stuff. But the rest is excreted through the leaves. So that excretion through the leaves actually attract your pests and diseases and your insects. So you have to spend more money on controlling that as well. So it is very disruptive to the soil system, and it's also disruptive to the plant. The plant has to use energy to convert all these chemicals into usable molecules, and that puts stress on the plant, and when the plant is stressed, it attracts disease and pests and disease. Yeah. The other thing that is important to remember is that when you put down stuff like nitrogen and nitrates and so on, when it leaches, it takes calcium with it. So you be continuously using more calcium in your soils. You'll also see that your soils gets depleted from carbon, because if you put inorganic nitrogen down to balance the nitrogen, the microbes eat the carbon out of the soil, and basically you burn your carbon out of your soil. The other thing is you also need more water, because if you apply salts, the plants will be more thirsty. It's very similar to eating biltong. So if you eat biltong, you need more water, and that's what you do to your plants. So when it becomes very hot that day, the plants won't be able to handle that heat, and because of the salts, and you will get more sunburn. So it's all very negative. So if you can get rid of all these chemical fertilizers, then obviously your system can grow and achieve higher fertility much quicker. So a couple of years ago, we decided to develop organic fertilizers that will be able to replace chemical fertilizers and achieve the same result or better. So we have fruit orchards running on 3 years now of our chemical fertilizers. We do soil corrections every now and then, but the normal chemical fertilizer program that you do on a monthly basis or so is replaced with organic fertilizers. So the first orchard that we applied these products to was a 45-year-old pear orchard that was destined to be pulled out. So the first year we saw that the trees regenerated new branches, so there was a regenerative process happening. New shoots formed. The next year that those orchard produced the highest production in its entire history, 45-year history. It achieved its highest production the second year without chemical fertilizers, which I think is quite something. I mean, it's really unheard of that a tree that old will achieve its highest production ever. You can see on this photos as well that the plant's quality, or the leaf quality and the fruit quality is actually very good on our programs, and that's because the health of the trees are very improving with the longer you carry on these programs. Incidentally, the control block of that very old orchard is always produced higher production than the orchard that we treated, but the third year on our program, our trees produce more than the control block. So this is, most of the other orchards are 2 years on our program. So this is just to show that the first year on our program, the results are very comparable production-wise. This is an average of 5 orchards, 5 control orchards to 5 production orchards on the Eco-Delta program. The second year, there's an increase in production on the Eco-Delta products program, and there's also less culling in orchards. So all the class 3 fruits are put in a juice bin in the orchard. and there's less of them. So the quality of the fruit is also improving. We call this program that we do the Eco-Delta program. And it's basically revolves around these 4 pillars. So we start off with a chemical analysis of the soil. So that's a normal soil analysis of the macro and micronutrients. So we will try to balance those things, and the ones that are lacking, replace that and so on. And look at your calcium magnesium ratio and all that. Once that is done, we will monitor in season with leaf sap analysis. What you want to achieve is to have a leaf sap analysis that's in this mid section, that's actually the adequate level, and then it's low on this side and high on that side. So we would like to balance these nutrients as much as possible with foliar sprays. So that's an interim measure until we get the soil system functioning well. We'll apply foliar sprays to rectify any deficiencies or excesses in the leaf analysis. We measure the nitrates, the ammoniums, and the total nitrogen. So what you actually want is you want very low nitrates and ammonium levels, but you want to see high total nitrogen levels. That means that all the nitrates and ammoniums are converted to amino acids, and that then your plant's very healthy. So also on the chemical, just to clear up, the amount of chemical fertilizers we cut on a farm depends on the quality of the soil. So the nutrient holding capacity of the soil is higher on clay soils than on sandy soils. So and also with carbon content of the soil, the higher the carbon content, the more minerals the soil can hold. So on very poor soils, we probably cut the fertilizer requirement, by between 50 and 70%, or cut it by between 30 and 50% of the original program. And on better soils, we'll be able to cut it between 50 and 100%. So the idea is to manage the chemical side down and improve the quality of the soil in the same time, and then improve the system of each production cycle so that you can apply less fertilizer until you completely wane yourself from chemical fertilizers. Then other thing that we look at is biology, and here we have to realize that plants actually farm with microbes. Plants excrete nutrients out of their root that they entice or feed the organisms to multiply in the soil. They entice these organisms to enter their roots. This is bacteria inside the root. Then the plant produces oxygen molecules that actually degrade the outer cell wall of the bacteria, and they assimilate the contents of the bacteria inside the plant. Some of the bacteria realize that they are being attacked and want to escape, so they produce this side shoot or side roots on the side of the root, and then they escape out of that soft cell walls at the tip of the root, and they reproduce when they're back in the soil, they reproduce again. So this cycle is basically how plants feed themselves. They entice the microbes inside the root, they sip the microbes and basically assimilate them in their bodies. So we have these compost systems. This is the 2,500 liter systems, and this is how it looks inside the tank. So the air comes down here and it goes out in this cross. So the idea is that all the organic matter will be always picked up by the air that flows down in a vortex like this. You'll also notice that the tank has a sump so that we can drain the tank completely. You put your compost in here. There's also a diffuser here at the bottom that stirs the compost inside the tank, and you have a heater that heats the water to 25 degrees. There's your blower that supplies the air to the system. So this is just how the compost tea looks from the top. We put the compost in the sifts, as explained earlier. There's about 60 liters of compost in the sift like this. And our brewing time is 48 hours. 48 hours because you get a better balanced tea. There's lots more protozoa in the tea. They produce, by eating the bacteria, they produce a lot of metabolites, and that is a good tonic for the plants. It provides the plants with all the essential molecules that make the plants healthy and resistant to disease. So this is how the compost tea looks inside. This organism is a stalked amoeba. It has little hairs on the top that creates a vortex, and it sucks up the bacteria inside its body and obviously eats it. And all the nutrients that are released are then utilized by the plants and other microbes and so on. And that is the metabolites that I referred to earlier. These little black dots are the bacteria, and you can see that vortex that was created there. All these larger organisms are basically protozoa, and you see your fungi inside these little brown patches. This is organic matter. And you see that structure that the organisms make. They collect all these different particles and bind them together to form flocks. So this aeration thing is already happening inside the compost tea. And when you apply these organisms to the soil, they will start aerating your soils to get air into the soil. And that's why you automatically sort out your physical properties of your soil if you apply these aerobic organisms that we produce from compost teas. So the last thing I want to talk about is the energy component of the system. So what we basically, just to recap, we sort out the chemical composition of the soil, and we'll do that over time. But, try to balance the minerals and so on. We apply the biology, aerobic organisms, very diverse aerobic organisms. And then we apply the energy to the system to actually increase the nutrient cycling capacity of the whole system. So the energy of the system, we apply organic products that we make ourselves. It's anaerobically fermented products. Most of the stuff that we apply is made from seeds. So we ferment different kinds of seeds that we mill and then ferment, and this liquid organic product is applied on a 2-week process, in the growing cycle of the plants. So we have these products are made from seeds, and then we have the C Improve, which is a fish hydrolysate, and we've got organic acids and amino acids and so on. And then we also have chelated minerals that we can use as foliar sprays. But the whole thing is that we're trying to move away from the idea of quality from quantity, and focus more on quality, because it's more on the quality of the energy is more important than the quantity. So we apply less than 10N when we treat these fruit trees of our products, but we get better results than what they get with higher than 100N chemicals. So because our processes are synergetic to the system and not disruptive, we get much better utilization of our energy that we put down. So all our products have active carbon. Basically, that means carbon that can do work that can be taken up by a plant and used as building material for fruits or leaves or shoots or whatever. The whole idea is that you need to build your carbon levels in your soil. Just be mindful that dead organic material, although very useful and should be on the soil surface, that conversion to soil carbon is very low. Most of that dead organic material will be burnt in the sun or will be lost through CO2 respiration from the microbes in the soil. So the best way to build soil carbon is with plants, to utilize the capture of the sun's energy, convert that energy to root exudates and pump that into the soil. That is the best utilization of carbon, or gets the best soil sequestration of carbon in the soil. So what we want to achieve is basically build a battery in the soil. So if you use inorganic fertilizers, you're basically oxidizing your carbon in your soil, whereas you use organic fertilizers, you're reducing and you're building this battery that you can store energy in the soil. The quality of the plants can clearly be seen, the difference in quality between the chemical control and the eco-delta treated blocks here. These cabbages were treated the month after planting. So the first month they received their normal chemical fertilizers, but thereafter they only received our organic fertilizers. The cost usually of these programs are much cheaper than a chemical alternative on their own. Even if we only reduce the chemical fertilizers by 50%, the cost is still cheaper than 100% chemical program. So this is a very old video of when I was still working on a farm. So the first picture was of my neighbor's farm, where I let me just play the video again, where the soil is so hard you can't get this iron peck into the soil, but after applying compost tea just across the fence of on my farm, you can get the peck into the soil quite easily. And this is the type of soil aeration that you got, the crumb structure, and you need this crumb structure for nitrogen fixation to happen. You can't get nitrogen fixation in compacted soil, because you need that difference between anaerobic and aerobic inside the soil to actually make this nitrogen fixation possible. Then you get much better breakdown of organic matter, so you can make compost in your orchards or in your fields, basically by breaking down dead organic matter much more effectively, and you can build this beautiful soil structure. Your water infiltration rate will also increase, and your water holding capacity, if you break down this organic matter, you'll see that the roots growing into that dead branch of what I showed you there. And this is just to show you how quickly water infiltrates in the soil if it's aerated. That's equivalent to 100 millimeters of rain that I'm putting down there. Yeah, when you put microbes down and you build your soil organic matter, you're going to increase your soil's capacity to buffer against salts. And all these microbes will then restore the communication between plants and microbes, and you'll get much better utilization of all the minerals in the soil. And you'll see this happening where your roots are actually colonizing the whole soil profile, with all that feeder roots. So the plant benefits in the sense that, nutrient availability is enhanced. The plant is protected against disease. It gets all these metabolites from the organisms. That stimulates more complex growth. So you get more smaller branches on the trees, for instance, which are much more fruitful and can bear much more fruit on a particular tree. And you find it much more resilient against environmental stresses that are very prevalent now in our days that we're having now. And obviously the end game is high production, better quality, better shelf life, and extra spin-off is the longer productive life of the orchard. Even on stuff like butternut, if you can get another few weeks out of that butternut producing, or on your tomatoes producing, because of the health of the tomatoes that are plants that are good, then you produce more, So the farmer benefits the cost reduction, and also in less losses, and then also in high production and quality. So it's much more profit doing this way, you know. And we benefit the whole. So the whole idea is to leave the system in a better condition after each production cycle, so that we, you know, contribute to the benefit of the whole and create a system where we can all prosper. So in conclusion, we should rather have a co-creative relationship with the rest of creation. We should more connect with the system because we are part of the system. It doesn't help to try to steer the system if you're not connected to it. We should optimize the flow and capture and storage of energy, because that's the key of the whole process. You know, the more energy you can store in your system, the better. And it's only possible the more life you stimulate, the more microbes, the more plant species, the more places where energy can be stored as such, the better or more resilient your system becomes. And we should feed the system with the right information, because, you know, encoded in every product is the whole production process, and the contents of the product and how the product has been handled and so on is transferred to your system, your agricultural system. So that I already talked about the oxidative forces of chemical fertilizers, whereas organic does the opposite. It's actually reducing and stimulating that the system cools down. And we need to cool down the agricultural system and the world at large. So the more carbon we can sequester, the cooler the climate, or the more energy we can capture in the soil, the cooler the climate will become, and the less problems we will have. So the whole idea is to create the self-regulating regenerative systems. And there's a design language to nature, and the way it happens is that the information that we feed the system will set forth the energies that will create the matter and that experience of our reality is the process of information creating energy, creating the 3D representation of that information that you sent out in the first place. So all this stuff that we experience now is biofeedback from the information that we fed the system a long time ago. And not really only us, but everything around us obviously contributes to that process. But nevertheless, we are co-creators in this process, so we need to create more consciously. So at the moment, we're creating our reality unconsciously and doing the wrong things, and that obviously have the effect it has. So if we can change the way we do things, we can change the outcome of our reality as such. Yeah, so that is what my speech was all about. Hope that is helpful and beneficial to you all. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It's really a privilege to be able to share what we are doing here in Botswana as a crop and livestock farmers in the process of implementing more organic principles to be more economic. So I first want to start to show you a small video that just gives context of our situation, which also explains what we are doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. So because every farming system is different. And then I will go over to my presentation, and then you're welcome to ask questions afterwards. So as you've seen on the video, we are situated here on the eastern side of Botswana, right next to the Limpopo River, which is also our main source of water. We also have boreholes, but we mainly use the water from the Limpopo River. And we have about 250 hectares of irrigated fields under pivots. So our main crop is basically carrots and beetroot, and we supply that to all the supermarkets in Botswana, and sometimes a little bit of exporting. But this is our Botswana market is our main market. And then we also have a limousine stud, and why the breed specifically is because they've got a very good meat to bone ratio. So they produce more meat on a carcass than any other animal breeds. So we supply bulls to commercial farmers that wants to crossbreed them with other animals. And from a diversity point of view, we also have quite a bit of other animals on the farm. We've got a commercial herd of Brahmans and limousine crosses. We've got some sheep. We've got some goats and free-range chickens, bees for honey, and then rabbits for meat as well. All right, so now building soil health as a foundation of economic prosperity. I think the reality of a large-scale farm is that the numbers make sense. It is nice to have to say, you know, you're an organic farming for home production, etc. But when you do large scale, we're talking about large numbers of fields, of people being employed, etc. So whatever we do on the farm needs to make economic sense. And we changed our focus to say, what will make the difference? And decided to build the soil health will really be the difference, make the difference in our business. And the reason why, well, it all starts with the soil. Where we, the healthy and a productive soil gives you healthy and productive crops, and thereafter animals, healthy, productive people, and which produces a healthy and productive farm business. And obviously, ultimately, on a bigger macro scale, also a healthy planet. So if we say, what is it that we really want to achieve? Because you need to set an objective and then measure yourselves against those objectives to see how you are doing. So the importance of the healthy soil is that, first of all, we want the soil to supply sufficient nutrients for the crops that we are growing. It must have a good soil tilth. Ideally, there must be disease-free soil and free from toxic chemicals. One of the things that we're really working hard at is to reduce the weed pressure, because when you produce crops like carrots and beetroot, which is really fine seeds, we have weeding challenges. So one of our focus is really how to reduce those weeds. And then what Jako spoke about a lot is also we want a large population of beneficial organisms, but also of a very high biological diversity. So another thing is that in terms of trying to be climate change resilient, it is really very, very important for us to increase the water infiltration of the soil, have good internal drainage, and increase our water retention. You know, it's really critical for us to produce more, but with less water. And the only way that we can do that is to improve the soil. And then lastly, very important, we want to sequester carbon into the soil, taking out of the air and put it into the soil. So these are our objectives in terms of what we want to achieve on a large scale on the farm. So there are certain principles that we are implementing, and typically you will find this information in your regenerative agriculture approach or organic agriculture approach. But so the point is that it is a principle. How you apply it on your farm or in your garden or whatever, it's different, because there are different methods. You need different implements, different technology, but the principles really remain the same. So what we are doing here on the farm is, first of all, we started off by reducing and replacing our chemical inputs and produce more of our inputs, especially on the fertilization side. We grow a diverse range of crops. In the beginning, it was just carrots and beetroot, and now we've changed it quite substantially. A very important principle that Jako also talked about is keeping the living roots in the soil, so that we can have liquid carbon in the soil and produce sugars for the microbes so that they can be alive and do their thing. We need to minimize soil disturbance. And recently we started integrating the cattle in the crop production area with great success. And lastly, a very important point is measuring. How are we doing in the short term, medium term, and the long term? So in this journey, one needs to understand that context is important in terms of our soil, our weather patterns, where we are situated, and really what is possible within our own environmental system, but also the economic system that we are operating in. So it's about developing a whole system that takes time. You know, it's a process. It's not like tomorrow I wake up and I decide, okay, now we're going to go organic, and now we're organic. It really takes time for the soils to improve, and it takes an investment, a financial investment, to make it happen. So on the short term, what did we do with regards to changing the soil fertility? We started changing or reducing the chemical fertilizers by using an organic certified base fertilizer. We are very fortunate here in Botswana. We have a producer that produces it from composted cattle manure. So we have that product available that we use as a base fertilizer, and that reduced our use of chemical fertilizers quite a bit. But we still do use chemical fertilizers. We are still in the process of moving over, but we are seeing how it is going. Then we also plant multi-species cover crops. Some of that we actually graze down with the cattle, and then we work it into the soil so that it can fertilize the soil and can also serve as food for the microbes. We follow a crop rotation program with the cash crops and then the cover crops, and then also feed crops for the animals. And then, as I've mentioned, the animal integration into our cropping system also fertilizes the soil even further. So over a long-term period, this is how we will build our soil fertility. We are also using compost on a small scale. We don't have sufficient material really for 220 hectares of irrigated field crops. But what we've started doing is producing Johnson Sioux compost that we can use as a compost tea, as Jako also explained. So this is just a type of compost that produces more a fungal dominant compost, and the hyphae of the fungi in the soil, they act like the internet. They send each other messages and go and fetch the minerals that the plants need and all of that. So that is really the objective of what we want to achieve there. And we also have 3 biodigesters where we supply gas for cooking to our workforce. And then that cow dung slurry is then also being used in the fields. So this is our soil fertility. And then the chemical part. How do we reduce pests and diseases? Now, on the short term, there's some inputs or some chemicals that we can replace with alternatives, and there's a list of some suppliers, mostly microorganisms that we can apply, and some alternative products that are really effective. And in the long term, we really want to move to a place where we have a healthy soil, and that reduce the pests and diseases. And the challenges, 2 main challenges that we are struggling now with is really the impact of nematodes. As you can see there on the screen on the right-hand side, that is a carrot that you don't want. They are full of nematodes, root knot nematodes, and nobody wants to buy a carrot like that. So we don't have a full biological solution for that yet. And also the Limpopo River that we use for irrigation is also a source of nematodes. So we need to find a solution for that. And then probably the biggest stumbling block for us is really how to reduce herbicides. The weeds, you really are challenged with carrots and beetroot to be weed free. And so at the moment, we still use herbicides. We've managed to reduce some of it, but that is not yet something that we can replace completely, either mechanical or by hand. If we were to do weeding by hand, then I think our carrots would cost like 200 pula a kilogram, and I'm not sure who will be able to afford that, because it will be quite a labor-intensive process. So that's an idea of what we are doing on pests and diseases. Then having multiple species on the field is really important. We do our cash crops as the carrots and the beetroot. Then we introduced the planting of multi-species cover crops. We've got our summer cover crops and we've got our winter cover crops. And how we choose our cover crops really depends on what we want to achieve on the different fields. So that is a combination of, you know, on the summer side, pearl millet or cowpea, sunhemp and babala. And that is really, we want to increase the variety of seeds that we are using. We've done it now 2 years already. And then on the winter side, it's also oats, veg, fodder radish and tiller radish. And we also kale and rape, we also included there. So once again, we also want to increase the biodiversity of this. And it's really something that we made sense in doing. And I'm really happy to say that we have excellent results with this. The following crops of carrots and beetroots, after that, our yields increased drastically. So this is something that we will continue. And then this year, we also produced some hay for the animals. Obviously, that's the roots of the oats is beneficial to the microbes in the soil and the structure of the soil, etc. What we are also doing is to increase the biodiversity on the farm. This is a picture of a swale. So a swale is a contour-based, a trench. And when it is raining, it is actually catching up the water. So do the water harvesting. And there you will see we had a 20 millimeters of rain, and that specific swale was filled to the brim. That's just after construction. And the right-hand side, that is what the swales are looking right now, fully populated with plants that is good for the insects and the bees and the beneficial insects. Also tree, we planted quite a bit of neem trees and moringa trees, and this is then fed through this irrigation system that, from the swales. So instead of the water running down, we're actually collecting it in the swale and then build up the water reservoir for these plants to grow. Okay, then in terms of, I can't see the heading of my, okay, so the multi-species cover crop thing. On the left-hand side, that is a field that was just being prepared for planting beetroot seeds. But what I want to say that you don't want to have a fallow land that is exposed to the soil for a long time at all. You always want to have crops growing. And at the bottom part is also, you don't want to burn anything, because then you just release the carbon in the soil, and instead you could have worked that material into the soil so that it can serve as food for your microbes and also supply nutrients for your following crop. So on the right-hand side, that is our a mixed cover crop. It was a winter cover crop, and that is really doing the job of what Jako explained in terms of with the photosynthesis, putting energy into the soil so that you can grow your crops better. So the thing is, why cover crops? Why do you always have the soil covered? It's really about the bottom line, because it makes financial sense to do that. Even though you use additional electricity, like for us for the pivots and water, it's really critical to build up your soil in such a way. It is not feasible for us to apply compost on such large scale in sufficient quantities. But the most efficient system for us is really to plant the cover crops and then have growing plants in the soil all the time. Now, to minimize soil disturbance is really an opportunity, but also a challenge. We have invested in a no-till planter so that we can plant the cover crops and the pasture crops without plowing the soil at all. So for a few years, when we do the cover crops and the pastures, we build up the soil. And then when we are planting carrot and beetroots, unfortunately, there's quite a bit of soil disturbance because you need to have a fine bed to plant those seeds. So carrots and beetroot, you will not be able to plant on a no-till method, etc. So we do some of it, but it's not completely no soil disturbance. Then adding livestock to our farm is really increasing the profitability of the farming system and is accelerating the improvement of the soil health. So here we can see we've planted, this is a winter cover crop. That's a combination of oats and rape and nitrogen crops, etc. And these limousines are grazing. We are using an electric fence to control their movement on the pivot. Otherwise, they will just trample everything. So we do controlled or high density controlled grazing over a period. As they're moving around, they are basically harvesting 2/3 of this cover crop, and then the rest we work into the soil. So profitability per hectare increase in such a way. Now, the thing is that, you can do all these wonderful things, but if you don't measure how you are doing, you don't really know if you are successful or not. So fortunately, industry is really making or assisting us by having tests available. We use a number of laboratoriums, and this is just NemLab. They're situated in Stellenbosch, and they have advanced their services quite a lot in the last few years. In the beginning, they assisted us in showing how much nematodes and what type of nematodes we have in the soil. But now they actually do quite a bit more, where you can actually see how your soil structure is improving and what is happening with that microbes in the soil. Are you actually capturing carbon? And it's also really indication of the soil health. So they've got quite specialized services with this regard. And so we do soil tests now on a regular basis on the different fields to see if the cover crops and our soil fertility program is actually quite better than just, guessing and hoping it is working, because, there's no financial purpose in just guessing and hoping that you are doing a better job.